Moving on to the 10-mark question. So Nigeria is considering to join the ACFTA, which is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Assess policies that the Nigerian government could use in response to concerns of the country's manufacturers and trade unions. Extract B, paragraph 3, if they join this trading bloc. Now, in my opinion, this is the trickiest 10-mark question there's ever been on a paper due to the wording. I believe the wording is slightly confusing, but it really differentiates students now. This is a really good question to practice for exam technique, as the question is extremely detailed, as you can just tell, a very big worded question, and if you go about it the wrong way, you'll basically be picking up no marks. So let's have a look at this. And also, a reason why I love this question is this concept of the ACFTA is actually a concept we taught last year in the live classes. In this context, since this is a paper from 2020, this is before Nigeria did join the AFCTA, where the whole context is essentially, the main part of the question is talking about how Nigeria refused to sign the agreement, but now in the modern day, both Nigeria and South Africa are part of this AFCTA agreement. But like it says, let's have a read of this extract, and specifically it tells us to have a read of the paragraph 3. First things first is title, so it's becoming more integrated. So a large number of countries agreed in Kigali, which of course is Rwanda. The reason I know that is because the previous past paper was on, if you guys have graded all the past papers, it was on Rwanda, and it said there the capital of Rwanda is Kigali. I don't think I'm pronouncing it right. But yeah, they signed the AFCFTA. What is this? As we know, it's a trading bloc. Great stats here. It includes 1.2 billion people and GDP of combined 2 trillion. And what is the main point of trading blocs is to reduce trade barriers, as you can see here, remove tariffs on more than 90% of goods. Now, let's go back to the question straight away. So this is talking about Nigeria considering to join this trading bloc. So now let's have a read of the third paragraph. However, two of the largest African economies, Nigeria and South Africa, refuse to sign the agreement. Why? Since the manufacturers and trade unions are concerned about the potential negative impacts becoming open to more imports, and also from other African countries at lower labour costs. So now, let's go back to the question and rephrase the question. Nigeria want to join this trading bloc, and give us policies the Nigerian government could use to protect the Nigerian economy against these two negative impacts, which are them being open to more imports and also other African economies having lower labour costs. So what policies can we use to negate the negative effects, to stop the negative effects of these? And of course, the main thing you need to remember, what does this say? What is the point of joining the trading bloc? The point, and as you know, which is your general content knowledge on trading blocs, the point of joining trading blocs is to remove trade barriers. They cannot join this trading bloc and then just implement a tariff, because that's not how trading blocs work. Therefore, for this question, this 10-mark question, a lot of students wrote that, saying, yeah, they should just join this trading bloc and then set up a tariff. Therefore, of course, if they set a tariff, it's going to reduce the quantity of imports. Therefore, it will solve the solution. But this is where you need to appreciate and use the context. And of course, that would make absolutely no sense in terms of the context if you joined a trading bloc and set tariff barriers. Therefore, that will not be credited in this question. Therefore, this is why I think this is definitely one of the harder 10-mark questions, since you really need to have internalized the context. You need to have understood the context and then wrote a policy that is appropriate, as tariffs, of course, in this scenario will not be appropriate at all. But now, let's think about policies that would actually work. I think the first one that comes to my mind is one of the problems is lower labour costs. How can they solve this problem that other African countries have lower labour costs? Now, this is a concept like in our live classes we teach with India. When the big revolution happened in India, how did India incentivize so much FDI to join the country, so foreign direct investment? One way was reducing corporation tax. Why? The reduced corporation tax, of course, we assume all firms are profit maximizers. If you reduce corporation tax, it means they pay less profits to the government, thus they retain more profits, meaning that there's more incentive for foreign firms to invest into India. The second thing they did is how else can you boost a firm's profits besides tax? You can help reduce their costs. How can you do that? So what India did, they reduced the wage costs and non-wage costs. So essentially, they lowered the minimum wage, or like kind of scrapped the minimum wage. They reduced regulations for workers. If you think about the UK, of course, very highly regulated with regards to workers' conditions. India reduced them essentially, and what did that do? Of course, both reducing corporation tax and reducing wage and non-wage costs, that incentivized new firms to invest into India. But that's kind of the same thing here. So what Nigeria can do to compete against these other African countries that have lower labour costs is something like deregulation, where, for example, Nigeria might have a minimum wage, so scrapping a minimum wage. That's a great paragraph point. Then what's the second problem, or the first problem they had, is them being open to more imports. How can we solve Nigeria being open to more imports? Of course, we can't use something like tariffs, but then if we can't use something like tariffs, how can we stop domestic Nigerian consumers importing from abroad and substitute them to start importing from their own country? And this goes back to the really simple assumptions. Why do individuals import? If you think about why do people from the UK import Chinese electronics, it's simply because they have of course China have a comparative advantage, thus they can produce it for cheaper, meaning that UK consumers can get it for cheaper. Therefore, how can Nigeria use this to reduce the number of imports? They can implement things like supply side policies to increase the productivity in their economy. And if the economy is more productive, of course, what does productivity mean? It means output per unit time. This means also with the increase in productivity, it means costs are lowered. If costs are lowered, it means they can now charge consumers lower prices. And if domestic consumers are getting lower prices, it means they will substitute away from importing goods to now buying domestic goods, meaning that the quantity of imports will decrease in Nigeria, solving those two problems. So our first paragraph would be, or whichever way you want to do it, but one of the paragraphs will be deregulation. The second paragraph will be supply side policies to help boost productivity, thus lower the costs. So I'm getting started with the paragraph on supply side policies. So one policy the Nigerian government could use is investing into these supply side policies. So just getting started with the supply side policies chain of analysis, this is why I emphasize students. All of my ACR students have at least known, I've taught them at least 2 different examples for supply side policies. Since it's such a common Section B exam question in Edexcel, it's unbelievable. And if you go into your exam without knowing a supply side policy, then really good application without it, I would just say you're not prepared, since it's such a common exam question. So know your example, like I've given you in previous exam papers, the apprenticeship example, know the real world application backing it, know the real world stats that back this up as well, to add that depth, to differentiate yourself from the normal applicants, the normal individuals who are just writing the theory on supply side policies. You can be this individual who has the best theory and then also the real world knowledge to back it up, and examiners appreciate that. And when examiners appreciate something, they will give you the top band and hopefully the top mark. Okay, so talked about the investment into supply side policies, and then just a bit of application with Nigeria. So Nigeria has amongst the worst labour productivity within Africa. Why is that? Due to they still, like he says, 35% of the population is based in agriculture, and the problem in Nigeria is that, for example, tractors, there's not many tractors but per 100,000, meaning that they're still very reliant on old school, just like manual labour, manual work, and of course that is very unproductive and very low levels of output. But now, this is one thing I want to clear up with supply side policies. There's just a tiny thing which I see in students' chains of analysis. Here, my policy is let's invest into education, but let's try to be a bit more specific and a bit more embedded in the real world, instead of just saying a very general investment into education, because education, as we know, it starts from nursery and it goes all the way up until postgraduate degrees and master's degrees. It doesn't necessarily matter what you do it into, but examiners will appreciate if you tell them a specific sector rather than just like everyone would do, just be very general and just say investment into education generally. But yeah, so investment in education, e.g. teacher training. Now what is that going to do? Of course it will improve human capital, and I'm thinking about things like HDI now. So what about human capital is going to improve? One big thing, of course, in developing countries is literacy rates. It's estimated that for countries like Nigeria, for every extra year individuals spend in schooling, it helps human capital or productivity increase about 10%, which is, of course, massive gains for each worker in the economy. And if individuals have better human capital, they're more literate, they're better with numbers, for example, of course, what's it going to improve? It's going to increase the levels of, and the big word, productivity, or improve the levels of productivity. Now remember, this chain of analysis, yes, we're talking about supply side policies, but we are still linking it to the question, which is why it's going to help reduce the number of imports. So improving levels of productivity, why is it actually going to help? So of course, more output per unit time, but that also, in conjunction, means that there's lower costs. So I'm going to leverage that lower costs and use that in my chain of analysis. Improve levels of productivity. So lower costs will therefore mean individuals, domestic consumers, will substitute away from importing goods to now buying the relatively cheaper domestic goods. But yeah, that is pretty much the entire chain of analysis. So consumers will substitute away from importing goods and now demand relatively cheaper domestic goods, thus reducing the quantity imported, thus reducing or removing the concerns Nigeria has to join the ACFCTA. Yeah. Now, with regards to evaluation for supply side policy, it's always really simple. There's a really good one with regards to developing countries and especially Nigeria. And the first one, of course, is time lag. It takes time for these policies to have effect on the economy. Of course, with teacher training, it can take several years for the new cohorts basically to come and graduate, thus to feel the effects. So that's definitely one, depends on the time frame. Another massive one in Nigeria specifically is, and just developing countries, is brain drain. For example, these individuals, these workers now who the government, Nigeria, have invested into improving the levels of human capital, what usually happens is that, especially in the NHS, the workforce of the NHS is a massive example where there's thousands of individuals coming from developing countries into roles like nursing, midwifery, and even like doctor, where individuals who have been trained in Nigeria, for example, nurses and midwives, they come and work in the UK. Of course, why? Since the wage relatively is better within the UK than Nigeria. But if you think about the evaluation point, of course, this is a great example of brain drain, where the highly skilled workers leave your economy for other economies. So it means that all this investment into training these workers, making them more productive, improving the levels of human capital to try to reduce the levels of imports, it kind of negates the entire chain of analysis, since once we train these workers to high levels, they're just going to leave the country. So therefore, it works as a really good evaluation point there. Okay, let's move on to the second paragraph. One thing I massively want you to keep in mind, guys, this is only a 10-mark question. I am giving you a lot of detail here because just because of the fact that this is a hard question, and in my experience, students really struggle with this. So I just want to give you a bit more detail just to make sure if a question like this does come up again, you know how to navigate it. But you probably do not need to write this much for a 10-mark question. 100% you do not need to write this much for a 10-mark question, but I'm just giving you it as like a model example. Okay, so how would I go about this paragraph? So deregulation, again, of course, this is technically a supply-side policy, a market-based supply-side policy, but an example you can give for this is reducing or removing the minimum wage. And if you really want to, you can literally just draw a minimum wage diagram, and then, of course, just talk about removing it. So, of course, we would move from the minimum wage to back to equilibrium. But, of course, what does removing the minimum wage do? It will reduce a firm's costs, and usually one large percentage of a firm's costs are wage costs. And specifically, if you think about Nigeria, lots of these firms are still relatively unproductive and they don't have much investment. Thus, especially for these firms, since they are very reliant on labour, so essentially since they don't have much investment, instead of being reliant on capital, they're reliant much on human capital, human labour, thus meaning that by reducing the minimum wage, and the wage being a large percentage of their costs, is going to reduce their costs massively. And why will that help maintain their competitiveness when they join this trading bloc? It will therefore, of course, mean if these firms now have lower costs, it means that they could compete with these other African countries like Kenya, like Uganda, which have lower wage costs, mean that they can, as they have lower costs, they can sell at lower prices, mean that they can compete with these other economies in the trading bloc. I mean, the domestic firms are not disadvantaged by their higher wage costs. Like I said before, this is a 10-mark question. For the second paragraph, there's not much needed here. Just make sure you state that chain of analysis. But yeah, of course, if you want to add an application point, an evaluation point here, you can add one evaluation point here. Of course, you can talk about the problems with removing the minimum wage, with workers' incentives, because of course, we still want to maintain productive workers, but if you get rid of their wages, it really massively reduces the incentives to work. So it could actually have a massive knock-on negative effect by reducing wages, or removing things like workers' regulations. It could actually have a net to negative effect rather than net positive effect. But just as a real-world application, Nigeria do actually have a relatively high minimum wage. Well, they have a minimum wage compared to other African countries like Uganda, which don't even have a minimum wage. So definitely is one thing to consider. But yeah, that is how to attack this 10-mark question. Like I said, definitely, in my opinion, is the hardest 10-mark question that is out there due to its very specific wording. But like I said, in the exam, keep calm firstly, read the question as much as possible, try to internalize the question, use the context, and you just need to be logical. Of course, you know your economics. You are at the level. Some of you are at the top levels of content knowledge. The question is telling you they're joining the trading bloc. They cannot use the policy of a tariff. It's just not logical. I'm sure many of you will pick up on it. It's just trusting yourself almost in that scenario that yes, of course, a tariff does not make sense here. I can't use a tariff for this question. But yeah, this is a really good example for your exams, meaning that if something like this does pop up, you've attacked a hard question and you know how to navigate it. So this is the beauty and why individuals who do past papers, and there's a direct correlation, the more past papers you do, the likelihood of you scoring those top marks, that top level, increases. Why? Because you gain more experience on the exam, where this is a really unique scenario. Random paper as well, 2020, is not for you. There's nearly 2025, there's 2016 to 2025, just a random paper in the middle, but individuals who are doing this paper should score better than the individuals who haven't. You can't control the questions, you can control how much practice you do. So the more you practice, the likelihood of you scoring that A star just increases. So 100%, as an ex student, I did my A-level economics once, I also got an A star. Just do you need to make sure you do every single past paper, at least one.